Juneteenth, a day commemorating the moment in 1865 when enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, finally learned they were free. More than 2 years after President Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, Juneteenth was officially recognized as a federal holiday in 2021. Joining us now, President of the National Action Network, host of MSNBC's Politics Nation, Reverend Al Sharpton. Reverend, your thoughts this morning?
Well, I think that as we are going to celebrate this holiday, we should also take a real measure of where we are. The fact of the matter is that those in Texas who were enslaved knew nothing about the Emancipation Proclamation, knew nothing about freedom. And those that were freed on that day of January 1st, 1863, that Lincoln signed, were in the Confederate States, not the free states. Those slaves in the free states weren't freed until the 13th Amendment. Even then, people in Texas weren't freed until General Granger came in this date in 1865 and let them know they were free. So all of this is American history, and certainly history for African Americans, at a time that history is being challenged to be taught in certain schools under this administration, and some states are trying to eliminate this. And I don't think that it is healthy, not only for those of us that are the ones that have ancestors that were enslaved. It's not healthy for the country to show the progress this country made in fighting slavery, of instituting the Emancipation Proclamation. It should be a way of us saying that we should continue to grow together rather than to try to eliminate the story from being told.
And Rev, of course, you and I were talking about 10 years ago. We were in Charleston, South Carolina, talking about the horrific murders that took place there a decade ago. And obviously, families got together. You have talked about this for some time. But here we are 10 years later, and just as those families suffered and remembered those lives that were lost, 10 years later, we see history being lost. We see the history of Black leaders, of cultural leaders being erased from parts of our government. Like where are we as a nation on the issue of race, and where do you think we move forward together past this time that unfortunately shows far too many people want to put the progress behind us?
No, I think that we're challenged. And if we study history, we know there's always been one or two steps forward, then a push back. The Civil Rights Act came after we saw many of the tragedies that led to it. In 1963, Dr. King's March on Washington, where the nation rose to really hearing great oratory with I Have a Dream. But just a month and a half later, they bombed a church in Birmingham and killed 4 little girls. That tragedy, the step back, led to the Civil Rights Act of '64. The beating of John Lewis and others on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, which was so graphic to the world, helped lead to the '65 Voting Rights Act. So I think when we saw Charleston, and I remember like it was yesterday sitting there, you built a set. You and Mika sat right there in front of where the massacre happened at Mother Emanuel AME Church. We saw the country start dealing with race, then again with George Floyd. But now we're seeing the setback. We're seeing the backlash. And I think that if we understand our history, we know it's always going to be one or two steps forward, one backward. We've got to keep going, and we have to do it together. The rise of racial attacks, the rise of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, as well as the murder. We're like, what, 2 weeks from 2 people being shot coming out of the Jewish Museum in Washington just for being Jewish. All of this must be seen in one context, because if you have hate crimes against some, you justify it against you.
You know, the actual history of Juneteenth has always fascinated me. Part of the story, as I understand it, is also that slave owners who were in other parts of the South, recognizing that the Emancipation Proclamation meant the beginning of the end for their economic system and way of life, started moving the enslaved people that they had west toward Texas, hoping that they could evade the Union Army. And, you know, you think about that, the cruelty of it, the disgust it provokes in us now, today in 2025. And I think about that as the story of justice deferred, but not denied. And there's a perpetual hope that you have as a Black American that one day we too will be made whole. I think this is a very bittersweet Juneteenth because so much of the progress that even within a living generation has been made. So my father's generation is now facing fierce opposition, retrenchment, rollback of civil rights. And yet, when you look over our history, that is the history of the country that the Reverend mentioned, which is you take 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. And, you know, part of what I'm so proud of is Black Americans' contribution to creating this country as a multiracial democracy, which is what the civil rights movement was. We should all embrace that together. And, you know, you can't stop.
We should maybe start calling it a holiday. It should be a day of remembrance. It should be a day of remembrance, a remembrance of inequity, historical inequity, where Black people in this country continue every day to play catch up. And they catch up, they get close to catching up, and then they fall back a bit. But remember it. Remember our history. We do not teach our history properly in this country. We just don't.
No, I think that's important.